Third phase of moon. Third.
Was there an advanced civilization over 500,000 years ago? There's archaeological evidence that supposedly people claim that prove this. Buckle up everybody, Blake Cousins' Third Phase Moon. We've got a special episode for you tonight. We're going to be going over 4 ancient mysteries in regards to recovered relics, the history behind them, how far do these amazing tools go back, what was their purpose. We're going to get into it. Also, we're going to be speaking with Brian Forrester in regards to some of his discoveries around the world. Buckle up everybody, this is Third Phase Moon. Let's just get to it. So there's one artifact that stands out, in my opinion, that could be the smoking gun in regards to an advanced civilization that once existed possibly 500,000 years ago. It's the Coso Artifact, and it was found by these rock hunters that were searching in the mountains of California. They're trying to supply their little rock store with individual kind of rocks as they put in their collection, but they brought one of these home, and they're known as geodes. And they opened it up, and what they found inside resembled something that they couldn't explain, but they thought that it could be evidence of a civilization that existed 500,000 years ago. So let's wrap our head around this. An artifact that resembles some kind of spark plug or energy device. People were kind of baffled about what this was, and it went on for decades. But recently, in the last 10 years, there was some study done on this Coso artifact, and some people state that this isn't an artifact from an ancient civilization, but it's in fact a spark plug from the Model T Ford from the 1920s, known as the Champion spark plug to be exact. But now people are still looking at this mystery a little closer, and some people are finding that they can't find the exact match. They've reached out to spark plug experts, historians in the industry, and to this day, they have not found the exact match or like kind of manufacturing. They say it resembles the spark plug, but it isn't the exact match of the Model T Ford Champion spark plug. So even to this day, there's a lot of controversy behind it. And some people say, well, it's in the geode, and to form a geode, like a rock around this thing, it would have to be 500,000 years old. That's how old geodes are to form in this kind of a shape. But it turns out maybe it isn't a geode rock after all. They say they were able to pick through it, and they find out that this geode rock, it's too soft. It can't be geode. So what is it? The mystery might be dissolved at this point, that it could just well be a Champion spark plug. But in my opinion, I still think there's evidence out there that does prove that there was an advanced civilization, but maybe there are more mysteries that people have in their closets, hidden away, and we just haven't seen it yet. But until that day comes, I'm still keeping my fingers crossed.
Recently, about a decade ago, there was a Russian fisherman that found a particular stone in the water. What he found may have changed history. A Russian university and paleontologist did a study on this particular rock and deemed it to be 250 to maybe 200 million years old. Now the question becomes, who built this computer chip? What advanced race could have existed 200 to 250 million years ago? Well, that's the big question. Has there been other discoveries found throughout the world that's hidden within rocks that produce evidence of this kind? What are we looking at here? Some people even speculate that this could be indeed just a natural fossil formation found and embedded in rocks naturally. We're looking at something like this, and I don't see any detail of the sort. What I'm looking at looks to me like a computer chip. Recently, with one of our treasure hunts right here in Hawaii, we've dug out some interesting artifacts, such as this right here. It's an old pocket watch from the 1890s, gold plated. And what we find interesting about this is typically the gears that we see inside of it, which resemble gears that are found within rocks found throughout the world. If you take a close look and you look at the craftsmanship of how this was made, how could something like this just about 130 years ago with this amazing science and technology, how could it have been made hundreds to 200 million years ago? That's the big question.
The AntiCathedra Mechanism is one of the greatest finds of the last century or so. Just around the turn of the century, 1900, treasure hunters were along a very traveled route that the Romans used to sail their ships and deliver goods to other places. And they found along the route some bronze statues and all sorts of different pottery and a lot of weird stuff, including the AntiCathedra Mechanism. As soon as they started taking this out of the water, it started to disintegrate. So they had to be very careful with it. It's in the water 2,000 years. When they put high resolution imagery up to this thing and were able to look inside, they noticed there were interlocking gears of high ingenuity, which means extreme intelligence. Not only that, there was seemingly found on the sides of it an instruction manual. It was inscribed on the side on what it does. The scientists compared the numbers inscribed in the text to the number of teeth were in the gears, which is amazing by itself. And their arrangement, they applied them to known astronomical cycles of antiquity. So not only that, you can apply what this AntiCathedra Mechanism is showing you, turn a dial, pick a date, and you can see where the sun, the moon, and the stars were aligned. All of the writings are from that period, so there's no doubt it came from that time, about 340 BC. Now, the front that faces you has a real large disc on it. Not real, it's the largest disc or gear. And that shows the number of days in a year. The next dial is the 12 signs of the zodiac. And if you turn this little lever on the side, you can put a date in that you wanted to go to, and it would show you where the sun, the moon, and solar eclipses, lunar eclipses. There's a spiral dial which shows the eclipses of the sun and the moon, which is, it's amazing. You see this thing and it looks like gears, and then it connects to the other gears on the bottom. It is wild, wild technology. Especially, they're calling it the first computer.
Let's talk about the Petrodox. The Petrodox was an object, a rock that was found by an engineer who was on a hike, John J. Williams. He found this object, and it had these metal objects protruding from it, so he dug it up and found this rock. Researchers have checked it out and say that it is over 100,000 years old. Now, they are metal prongs actually sticking out from a round object embedded in this rock. There's no way that it could be hoaxed. It's in there. It looks like an XLR cable, which is a microphone cable, the male end of it. But it really makes you ponder and think, yes, he found this in 1998, but if it's 100,000 years old, what does that say about our history? And I think a lot of us know that the history we were taught in schools isn't the history that truly happened. Now, many people and researchers have tried to buy this from him for $500,000, and he has said no. So if it was a hoax, you would think he would go for the money right away. So the fact that he has passed up all these offers and possesses this Petrodox, as they call it, says something to me. But that's just what I think. It's what it says is that the Petrodox is not an accretion, but a concretion, pumice or a fossil. It does not contain any known resins, cement, glues, or adhesives, limestone, mortar, any of that stuff. But not with non-granite binding agents, basically. So it's very hard. It's a rock, and it's very, very small. It's about 8 millimeters in diameter. The pins are about 3 millimeters high, in a spacing of about 2.5 millimeters, and the pin thickness is about 1 millimeter. So it's not that big, but it's made to connect to something. So they have done x-rays of it, and it is truly in there, and it's a sight to behold. So all I could do is just scratch my head on this one. The only other thing that I could possibly think that could do this is if someone had learned the skill to melt a rock, which has been referenced in ancient astronaut theories, that rock could be melted into shapes. But I'm not familiar of people doing that these days. So it's a mystery. It's a mystery, but it's very, very cool. It definitely says there was a civilization before us, and they were pretty bright. So I like this. It's pretty cool. The Petrodox.
Blake, it's always a pleasure for me to be with the Cousins brothers in your pursuit of the truth.
Good to be with you, Brian. And I got Dr. J with us, and we got some questions for you. Let's just get to it. If the Incas didn't build these megalithic structures, who did?
Well, Blake, the Inca could not have built the megalithic structures because they were a Bronze Age people, and the stone that was cut and shaped is much harder than bronze. The basic principle you have to work with is that your tool has to be harder than the material you're cutting. And therefore, it's clear, also based on weathering, that these megalithic structures are much older than the Inca civilization and had to have been made by a very advanced technological civilization. The only options I think we have are either the so-called Atlanteans or extraterrestrials.
You mentioned high technology a few times in your videos. Can I ask you what your theories are of some of the tools that were involved in making these megastructures?
The tools used to make the megalithic structures in the highlands of Peru we have to assume that they were beyond our present capability in the 21st century. And so in Egypt, for example, we see evidence of saw and drill technology, but in the highlands of Peru, it honestly appears as if this ancient civilization was able to change the molecular nature of the stone itself and turn it into almost like a marshmallow material temporarily.
Historians and experts have their own theories on how old these megastructures really are. What's your thoughts on the true origin of their age?
The age of the megalithic structures, we have to presume, are 12,000 plus years old. And this is based on the idea that there was a cataclysmic event or series of cataclysmic events that occurred on the planet about 12,000 years ago. And this is being backed up by science today.
Ancient symbols carved into stone at an archaeological site in Turkey tell of a story of a devastating comet impact. Scientists were analyzing the mysterious symbols carved into stone pillars that evidence from carvings made on a pillar known as the vulture stone suggests that a swarm of comet fragments hit the earth in around 11,000 BC. This devastating event, which wiped out creatures such as the woolly mammoths, also helped spark the rise of civilization. Scientists have speculated for decades that a comet could have caused the sharp drop in temperature during the period known as the Younger Days. By interpreting the animals as astronomical symbols and using computer software to match their position to the patterns of stars, research dated the event to about 10,950 BC. It probably resulted from a breakup of a giant comet in the solar system.
What's the importance of Göbekli Tepe, found in Turkey, now that it's discovered happens to be over 20,000 years old?
Göbekli Tepe appears to have been buried on purpose about 12,000 years ago, so its actual age is unknown, but obviously older than that. And what it makes it important is the fact that most civilizations are believed to be maximum 6,000 years old, such as in the Indus Valley. But now we have evidence of sophisticated cultural people existing at least 12,000 years ago.
I want to get your true thoughts, Brian. What could have caused these catastrophic events in the past? Was it possibly Mother Nature, earthquakes, a meteorite, or was there some kind of weapon that was used that we don't know about?
My theory about the cataclysm is again that it happened about 12,000 years ago. It could have lasted as much or as long as 300 years, and likely it was an emission of energy from galactic center that then crossed the galactic plane, entered our solar system, blew up one of the planets, which created the asteroid belt, then went through the sun and shot plasma from the sun straight at the Earth. This caused the immediate melting and ending of the last ice age very rapidly, in possibly weeks. The sea levels of the Earth rose by 300 plus feet, putting pressure on the crust of the Earth. This would have triggered earthquakes and other terrible events to happen on our planet, would have wiped out all of the megafauna of North America, wiped out most of humanity, and any advanced civilization also would have disappeared at this time, especially those that were close to the coast. This is where we come up with the concept of the ancient civilization of Atlantis being destroyed, according to Plato, about 12,000 years ago.
What is the oldest megastructure or structures that you believe were not created by man, rather from some sort of ancient high technology?
I think that the megalithic works that we see in the highlands of Peru, as well as Pumapunku and Tiwanaku in Bolivia, the Great Pyramid System in Egypt, Baalbek in Lebanon, Petra in Jordan, and other structures in Turkey, Greece, and Italy are all at least 12,000 years old. I can't say how old they are, but I can tell you all of them, I believe, based on geological weathering, the fact that high technology was used, that all of these structures, which we think of as simply being enigmatic, are a minimum of 12,000 years old.
Lately, Brian, you've been using the drone and getting unprecedented shots of these megalithic structures. How has it helped you in recent discoveries?
The use of drones, or quadcopters as I prefer to call them, give you an unprecedented view of the megalithic structures because you literally can see from a bird's eyes point of view. Also, you can scan the area to see if there are other structures in the area that you can't see from the ground. And so it's a phenomenal new tool that is opening up possibilities, explanations, and views that we never had before.
Now, Brian, we're looking at this incredible geometric shape embedded in the side of the mountain. What could have made this? What was the tools behind it? Some people are saying it's a moon calendar.
The site you're referring to is called Kiarumiok, which in the Inca language means the stones of the moon. But of course the Inca didn't make it. It had to have been made probably with advanced technology, and the weathering on the stone surface shows us that it's incredibly ancient. Some people theorize that it was a moon calendar, other people theorize that it was a solar calendar, possibly it was both. But the local people themselves and academics have no explanation as to who made it, when, why, and what its original function was. The Inca probably used it as a ceremonial site, but they used all of the megalithic places as ceremonial sites.
All right, Brian, what do you got to say to the people of Peru today in regards to your theories that the Incas, in fact, did not build these megalithic structures? It almost sounds like you want to rewrite the history books.
Well, the great thing is that the people of Peru, especially the guides at Machu Picchu, actually come up to me more and more as time goes on because of my YouTube channel, and they tell me, your theories are fascinating. It appears that our history here is much older than what we were taught in school. And so the Peruvian people are warming up to the concept that civilization in this little country, which is incredibly rich culturally, dates back a minimum of 12,000 years and employed lost ancient high technology way, way in the distant past. Academics don't accept this, but the people are starting to understand, which is phenomenal.
Tell me about your recent trip back to Pumapunku and the H blocks and the anomalies in regards to your compass readings.
Pumapunku in Bolivia is becoming more and more interesting and enigmatic because there are two types of stone there. Red sandstone, which is neutral as regards magnetism, and then the gray andesite, which is magnetic. But the interesting thing is the magnetism of the H blocks, for example, which are made of the gray andesite, it's not an even magnetism difference that we find, but it depends on the surface that you're scanning. So what Dr. Ken is showing you now is the natural magnetism of the area. And then when he comes close to the stone, again, about a 180-degree change. And here are some of the magnetic anomalies that we are studying. This is in the center of one of the H blocks. Notice the compass moves 180 degrees and then 90 degrees more, and then becomes somewhat erratic. So no one understands fully what is going on with the magnetism here. It's not simply the fact that the stone contains magnetite. It means that the magnetism has been altered. Possibly it relates to the shapes of the H blocks and other stones themselves. And then here we have Dr. Ken on the stone that has the groove in it with the holes. Again, notice what happens to the compass needle. Absolutely amazing. So that's my present study, is to try to correlate the relationship between the shaping of the stone, magnetism, and the incredible flat surfaces that we encounter at Pumapunku, which again, most academics believe were made by the Tiwanaku civilization 2,000 to 1,000 years ago. But it's clear whoever created Pumapunku had very advanced, lost, ancient, high technology.
Now, Brian, this is my final question for you. And again, this is a personal question. In your own gut, what is your belief of how these ancient structures were created? Do you think that we as humanity created them, or do you think that they were created by extraterrestrials or non-terrestrial beings that did not originate from this earth?
Again, the fact that many of the megalithic structures, if not all of them, in the highlands of Peru and Bolivia were made using very advanced technology, in some cases technology we don't have in the 21st century, tells me quite strongly that, again, there was possibly a very advanced human civilization that did it, or it was extraterrestrial in nature. Now, I'm beginning to think less and less that it was done by an advanced human civilization, because we would have to see cultural development. We don't see that. So either the human civilization was destroyed by ancient cataclysmic events 12,000 years ago, or that extraterrestrials were here at that time and they constructed these megalithic structures in Peru, Bolivia, and other parts of the world.
Brian, it's been an incredible adventure with you. Thanks for joining us right here at Third Phase Moon. You keep in touch and let us know if you find any more discoveries in the areas that you visit, man.
It's always a pleasure for me to work with the Cousins brothers, and I'd love to get back in contact with you to discuss my recent findings on Easter Island, evidence of lost ancient high technology, as well as future discoveries in February in Mexico and April in Egypt, Lebanon, and Jordan, and beyond. Aloha to you and all of your audience from me here in Paracas, Peru.
And also, thank you, Dr. J, for joining us right here.
Blake, it's always a pleasure to be on, and thanks again.
Everybody from around the world who just watched this, appreciate your support right here at Third Phase of Moon. Keep your eyes on the skies. We're not alone. We'll see you again next time.
The best way to observe the island, of course, is by a quadcopter. And in this case, it's little Horus, my smallest of 3 quadcopters, very transportable and collapsible. And this gives you a sense of the landscape around Moon Island. You see ancient agricultural terraces of the Inca time period. And the island of the moon was specifically a place for the chosen women of the Inca. They were the highest level of femininity in the Inca civilization. And this was their refuge, or I guess almost the equivalent of a nunnery or convent, but in the Inca concept, women had as high a place in the civilization as men. And so this site has been largely reconstructed. And you can see its composition is actually quite simple. It's rough-hewn stone with clay mortar, and then the clay mortar is used to cover the surfaces in order to give the buildings a very pleasant appearance. They're the standard looking trapezoidal shapes that you find at many Inca structures. And now pulling back once again, you see that almost the entire island at one time was terraced. And I don't know how many of these chosen women lived here, probably several hundred. And then this gives detail of the archaeological site, probably destroyed by the Spanish in the 16th century. And this area is now being restored rather slowly. And then this gives you a view of the quadcopter going out to have a look at Lake Titicaca. If you look very carefully, you can see the Andes in the background on the left-hand side. Others are covered in cloud because it's snowing at this point. And here again, we see the very, again, quite simple construction of the Inca complex. And not that many tourists visit the island of the moon as compared to the island of the sun, but it's well worth it if you are in the area of Lake Titicaca. And as a little bonus, here we are at the island of the sun, which is much, much larger and quite close by. And this is a view of one of the Inca sun temples. Again, not a sophisticated structure. It would still be quite complex in terms of the number of people required to build it. But remember that all of the complex polygonal work that you see in the city of Cusco is pre-Inca. This is what an actual Inca structure looks like. And finally, I'll soon be making a video about this site near Lake Titicaca called Kenawani. It's unknown what civilization or culture created it.
You've been taking us all around the world. From Peru, now we're in Egypt, and we're going to be case filing the Sphinx here. And the Sphinx has many mysteries. People wonder if they're basically chambers within the Sphinx itself or possibly underneath it. If you had an excavation license and you were greenlit, ready to go, where would you start and why in relation to the Sphinx?
I would explore the area in front of the paws of the Great Sphinx.
Yeah, we see that you were explaining in the video that there is some kind of boardwalk, possibly to mask what's really underneath there. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's what's really interesting, and that's the information you get when you're actually in Egypt. What I found out
is that Dr. Robert Schoch, who was the geologist able to date the Sphinx at being at least 12,000 years old, they did ground penetrating radar, and they found at least one chamber existed underneath the front paws of the Sphinx. So when he left, Zahi Hawass and the Egyptologists decided to start doing excavations very late at night, and they supposedly were able to find and excavate this chamber, and that's why the boardwalk has been put over top of it to hide the fact that they've already done the excavation.
So you're saying that history has been written. They're not letting us know exactly what's going on. Was this the present day government?
This was during the time of Mubarak, so probably the 1990s, when there was extreme cover-up going on in Egypt. But again, it's from local knowledge that you learn certain things like the boardwalk you're standing on was put in place to hide a secret excavation in search of the Hall of Records.
Tell us a little bit more about the Hall of Records.
Okay, the Hall of Records, I believe, was first described by Edgar Cayce, who was a clairvoyant, very famous American. And he stated that there was a Hall of Records underneath the front paws of the Sphinx that contained ancient information, possibly carved on gold or other metallic tablets, talking about the true history of humanity.
So you're saying somebody has possession of these incredible artifacts, information?
Well, we do know, thanks to Robert Schoch, that there is at least one chamber underneath the great paws of the Sphinx, and that it has been excavated, and any artifacts, if they existed, would have been removed. We also know that there's a huge series of tunnels under the Giza Plateau that go from north to south and east to west.
And where could they possibly lead? It just goes on and on, the mysteries of Egypt and the Sphinx itself. There are these photos of photographic historic evidence of what it appears to be some kind of like manhole on the top of the Sphinx's head itself. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are actually some old photographs of a man standing inside of it. It's been covered in concrete since that time, so it's we're not sure if it's actually an entrance to the hollow core of the Sphinx or if it's simply a depression in the top. That's something that would require something like a drone or a quadcopter to fly over and see.
Yeah, and they're not allowing any drone flights over there, I take.
Not at all.
Okay, so who really is in charge of this, historic, amazing, location? And is the government over there doing any kind of new exploration or excavation of the area?
Yeah, since Zahi Hawass was basically kicked out because of corruption and other things alleged, I think in the last 2 years, there's a new Ministry of Antiquities who's actually much more open-minded, and he's opening up sites that have previously been prohibited to the general public.
Well, that's, at least the access is opening up now. So basically, who really built the Sphinx, in your opinion? A lot of people are giving the pharaohs the credit.
Well, we do know, thanks to geologists, there are actually 200 of them around the world that have confirmed that the vertical weathering on the Sphinx had to have been done by precipitation, so extensive rain over hundreds, if not thousands of years. And the last time the climate in that area would have been that wet would be at least 10,000 years ago. So that's twice the age of the dynastic Egyptian or pharaonic culture. But whether it's 12,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 will require more geological analysis. But we do know that whatever culture did this had to have high technology of some kind, because the area where the Sphinx is called the Sphinx enclosure, and all the stone that was removed to reveal the Sphinx is right in front of it, which is the Sphinx temple. And there you have multi-ton blocks, some 40 tons or more in size. Most Egyptologists believe that the Sphinx is probably about 4,500 years old and is contemporary with the construction of the Great Pyramid. But again, They're speculating, whereas the geological evidence is proving that it has to be at least 10,000 years old.
Could you describe to us what you would visually see if you would step back in time 12,000 or 10,000 years ago and describe what the Sphinx would have looked like in its completion back then?
Well, it probably looked like a lion. We do know that the face has been recarved at least one, if not two times, and throughout its history, it's been buried in sand up to its neck. And so the erosion on the surface of the body is much more extensive than on the face, and that proves that the face has been recarved, probably in dynastic times, and the face is completely out of proportion with the body. So originally, most experts I know believe that the Sphinx was in the shape of a lion, and its eyes were pointing towards the star Sirius.
What an amazing sight that would be. Brian Forrester, keep up your amazing adventures around the world. We look forward to have you back next week, and we've got some questions for you. And if anybody wants to have a question for Brian, please leave it in the comments below. And whatever comment gets the most thumbs up, we'll bring that over to Brian Forrester. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to check the link out to Brian's YouTube channel. He's posting pretty much, I don't know, how often are you posting, Brian?
About every 4 days, so not as much as you guys.
Oh wow, but you're on location. It's quite incredible, and thanks for sharing, Brian. Take care and be safe.
Always a pleasure. Aloha.
Underneath the paws. Also, what we can see up here is evidence that the officials were drilling into the bedrock in order to see if there was an underground chamber. But have a look at the locations of where the actual drill holes are. So this is about halfway down the body of the Sphinx. And you can see these caps are on top of angle drilling, core drilling, I believe in the 90s or perhaps after that, in order to see if there are holes or chambers or tunnels under the Sphinx. As we round basically the elbow, and here we have another one. And here we have another one. But again, what's curious is the transition between the bedrock here and these obvious blocks which were set into place. They're basically at ground level. So do they represent a cover over top of the chamber? And is the front access to the Sphinx, in fact, right in this area here, covered by the boardwalk? Because again, when we go to this side, the bedrock is there, the slabs are here, continuing all the way to the end of the other paw, where again we have the bedrock.
I want to thank everybody who joined us on the September 28, 2020 episode. It's been a wild ride. What do you guys think of these ancient relics? Are they proof of an advanced civilization that existed over 1,000,000 or 500,000 years ago? I think they do exist, these relics that prove it. I want to get your thoughts below, everybody. Be safe out there. Blake Cousins, keep your eyes on the skies. Thanks everybody in the premier live chat and the huge support. It means a lot. We'll see everybody real soon.